As a land-grant institution, the University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign has a responsibility to acknowledge the historical context in which it exists. In order to remind ourselves and our community, we begin with this statement. We are currently on the lands of the Peoria, Kaskaskia, Piankashaw, Wea, Miami, Mascoutin, Odawa, Sauk, Meskwaki, Kickapoo, Potawatomi, Ojibwe, and Chickasaw nations. It is necessary for us to acknowledge these Native nations and for us to work with them as we move forward as an institution. Over the next 150 years, we will be a vibrant community, inclusive of all our differences, with Native peoples at the core of our efforts.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm glad we're starting on a high note, casual note. I think that would help Susan get to know our audience and see how friendly we are here. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Krista Lamuza, Dean of the College of Education. Welcome to the 19th Goldstick Family Lecture in the Study of Communication Disorders, made possible by the generosity of Philip and the late Beverly Goldstick. I am really excited to be joining you today for this annual lecture. So today we join over 200 participants from across the nation, both in person and online, to hear from a leading scholar in the field of special education. Our speaker this year is Dr. Susan Johnston, and she's joining us here today from the University of Utah. And the title of her presentation, is it up there? Yes. Navigating Opportunity Barriers Experienced by Individuals Who Use Augmentative and Alternative Communication. So the annual event would not be possible, as I mentioned, without the generous support of the Goldstick family, who identified a need and made a difference, giving students, scholars, and practitioners an opportunity for both personal and professional growth. As of this academic year, the Goldstick family has supported over 30 fellowships, 10 research teams, and 4 scholars in the field of special education. So let's give a round of applause. And this gift has really had a global impact on the field of special education, with past recipients holding scholarly appointments around the world, including the United States, Spain, and Chile. Thank you to Phil and the Goldstick family for the generous support you have shown the College of Education over the years. We're really grateful for your continuous dedication to supporting special education research. Before I invite Cheryl Light-Schreiner to the podium to introduce this year's Goldstick speaker, I would also like to acknowledge our new head for special education, Dr. Matthew Lambert. Thank you. He has joined our college this year, coming from the University of Nebraska, and we could not be more happy to welcome him to the Illinois family. So thank you again, and I'll pass it on to Cheryl so we can move on with our program, which I know it will be a wonderful lecture.
Thank you, Dean Musa. That was wonderful. Thank you, Phil, Karen, Gail, and the rest of the Goldstick family. It's just so wonderful that we have this opportunity, and for your commitment to improving the lives of individuals with communication disorders and challenges. It's really, really wonderful. It is my sincere honor to hold the title of Goldstick Scholar beginning last year in 2022. I feel seeing the former Goldstick scholars out there makes me a little nervous because they did such a wonderful job before me. But in addition to hosting this wonderful event, the Goldstick family provides support to doctoral students who have research and professional interests in improving the lives of individuals with communication needs, similar to Marissa Zellinger. Marissa is the daughter of Karen and Alan and granddaughter of Phil and the late Beverly Goldstick. I will be announcing this year's Goldstick Fellows and the Zellinger Research Award recipients a little bit later in the presentation. I want to direct you to your programs, and there's a QR code, and you can scan those in order to submit some questions. And as time allows, we'll be fielding, I've got some helpers today that will kind of look through your questions, and we'll try to get some of those asked at the end of Dr. Johnston's presentation. So just take a look. If you need to prove that you were here, there's also a place for students to kind of say you were here, and I can pass that along to your professors if they request it. So, and then, so I will kind of be moderating those questions and answers at the end of the presentation. At this time, I'd like to introduce Marissa's mother, Karen Zellinger, and if you'd like to make a few remarks.
Good afternoon. Great to see everybody in person and virtually. Hopefully people tuning in to hear this wonderful lecture by Dr. Johnston. I'm excited because Marissa, my daughter, who has Rett syndrome, uses a augmentative communication system intermittently, not on a constant basis, and that's because primarily the turnover of staff at her day program, especially with COVID. There's been, I think across the board with all kinds of fields, it's true in the special ed field too. So anyways, I'm very, very interested in the talk because I think it affects us right at home here. But anyway, very excited for the topic. Great to see everybody. I'm so thrilled to represent our family right now on stage just at the moment. My parents really tailoring the gift that they've given to the college because of Marissa and making such a difference, I hope, in so many lives. And just really happy to be here, glad that you're here, and looking forward to the lecture. Thank you.
I would like to thank the Goldstick family again for the opportunity to bring another highly regarded scholar in communication disorders to our campus to share her expertise with us. The annual lecture is just one of the number of gifts that the Goldstick family has contributed to the University of Illinois community, and we really appreciate that. Dr. Susan Johnston has been a professor within the Department of Special Education at the University of Utah and enjoys teaching and engaging with her students. She had a chance to engage some of our students last evening, so that was really nice. She has numerous teaching awards within her college, lots of accolades and things like that. We can't cover them all, but we will try to mention a few. Susan has also served as a chair for the Department of Special Education, Director of International Initiatives, and an Associate Dean for Academic and Student Affairs. So she's had a lot of different positions at the University of Utah. She has been with the University of Utah since 1997. Dr. Johnston's research and scholarly interests include augmentative and alternative communication, early language and literacy interventions, and early childhood special education. In addition to authoring or co-authoring 17 book chapters and 47 journal articles, she has published 2 peer-reviewed books supporting individuals who use augmentative and alternative communication, breaking down opportunity barriers. We'll hear a little bit more about that today. The second book is Augmentative and Alternative Communication Strategies for Individuals with Severe Disabilities. And that book has also been translated into Hungarian recently, right? Fairly recently. So that's really great. We're getting the word out to the rest of the world. She is currently a co-PI on National Research and Training Grant, Project IPEP, Interdisciplinary Preparation of Early Childhood Professionals for Mental Health Promotion, Prevention, and Intervention. from the U.S. Department of Education, Office of Special Education Programs. She has also been a member of many national and international professional and service organizations, such as National CEDAR Task Force on Shortages in Teacher Education and the leadership team for statewide implementation of the pyramid model in early childhood settings. She received her master's and PhD in speech language pathology from the University of Minnesota in Minneapolis, which is where I met her. So we go way back. And her bachelor's degree in speech and hearing science at the University of Kansas. Our distinguished speaker has traveled from the University of Utah to be with us today. Please join me in an Illinois way, this year's speaker and my longtime friend, Dr. Susan Johnston.
As Dr. Leitschreiner mentioned, the title of my lecture today is Navigating Opportunity Barriers Experienced by Individuals Who Use Augmentative and Alternative Communication. I want to thank all of you for taking the time out of your day to think about how we as a community can better support individuals with complex communication needs and their families. I also want to specifically thank the Goldstick family for having the vision to create such an amazing training and research program that has impacted and will continue to impact the lives of so many people. In terms of an overview for today's lecture, I'd like to address three main questions. The first question, what is augmentative and alternative communication? Second, what do we know about barriers to the effective use of AAC? And third, how can we address the specific barriers that we encounter? You'll also notice on this slide that there is a QR code. If you're interested, you can use this QR code to access both the PowerPoint presentation that you're viewing, as well as each of the documents that I share during this lecture. In case you're not sure if you want to use the QR code quite yet, I've also included this QR code again at the very end of the presentation. So let's dive in. First, what is augmentative and alternative communication? AAC includes all the ways that someone communicates besides talking. AAC can include unaided modes of communication as well as aided modes of communication. When we think about unaided modes of communication, those are modes that do not involve the use of additional equipment or materials and can include things like facial expressions, body language, gestures, and sign languages or sign systems. Conversely, aided modes of communication do use additional equipment and materials. Aided modes of communication can include no-text systems, such as communication boards or books that have photographs or line drawings that an AAC user can access and point to in order to communicate. Aided modes of communication can also include light text systems. Light text systems are single message voice output devices that allow an individual to depress a switch in order to communicate a single message. And finally, aided modes of communication also include high-tech systems. High-tech systems use technology that's more complex, such as speech-generating devices and laptops or tablets with software that allows them to operate as an AAC system. The reason I wanted to start with this is so that we all recognize that AAC is not a single system. Instead, under the umbrella of AAC, there are many options available, and like all of us, most individuals who use AAC do communicate using multiple modes. I also want to draw your attention to the last bullet point on this slide. Specifically, we know that individuals with a wide range of complex communication needs can increase their ability to communicate efficiently and effectively using AAC. So we know that AAC can work. However, unfortunately, knowing that AAC can be effective and ensuring that it is effective for individuals with disabilities and their families are two different things. Research and practice have revealed time and time again that barriers are often encountered when individuals are attempting to use AAC. The literature breaks these barriers down into two distinct categories: access barriers and opportunity barriers. Access barriers occur due to limitations in the current capabilities of the individual with disabilities and can include things like limitations in vision and hearing, in motor skills, in cognitive skills or abilities, as well as linguistic and literacy skills. Now, access barriers that occur due to limitations in the current capabilities of the communication systems that an AAC individual uses often occur if there's a mismatch between the capabilities of the communication system and the capabilities of the individual with disabilities. Now, in addition to access barriers, we also know that opportunity barriers can impact the successful use of AAC. Opportunity barriers are more distant from the AAC user and their communication system. Opportunity barriers occur due to limitations in things like policies, practices, attitudes, and knowledge or skills of professionals or communication partners. An example of a policy barrier might be a restrictive policy related to whether and how often an insurance company will fund the purchase of an AAC device. An example of a practice barrier might include practices related to access to district-purchased AAC technology outside of school. So, for example, if a district purchases AAC technology, a practice barrier might exist that states that an individual who uses that technology can't take it off of school property, which means they can't use that AAC technology at home, in the evenings, on the weekends, or during holidays and summer breaks, which obviously would create a barrier for the individual who's using that AAC system. Another type of opportunity barrier are attitude barriers. An example might include negative attitudes, which are sometimes blatant, but oftentimes subtle, about disabilities that limit opportunities for participation and employment. And finally, an example of a knowledge or skill barrier might be if there is limited knowledge or skills for professionals or communication partners regarding AAC systems and instructional strategies to teach the use of AAC. In order to effectively support AAC users and their families, we need to attend to both access barriers and opportunity barriers. However, too often, the focus of research and practice has been on issues related to barriers of access, with far less attention to barriers related to opportunity. As a result, the focus of my lecture today is exclusively on opportunity barriers. As part of my focus today on opportunity barriers, I thought I would start by talking about those barriers and strategies to address those barriers in the context of a case example. This case example is of a young girl named Bella, who was 8 years old when I first started working with her and her team. Bella had hearing and vision impairments and was able to wear hearing aids and glasses to correct for those impairments. She was also fed by a G-tube, had significant cognitive delay, and for the purpose of our presentation today, Bella had complex communication needs. Specifically, Bella communicated primarily through pre-symbolic modes of communication. She would engage in vocalizations to obtain attention. She would also grab and reach towards desired objects. Further observation of Bella and conversations with her team revealed that Bella was very socially motivated. When she was around peers, she would simply light up, and we also noted that she would frequently imitate her peers. I want you to hold on to that information because it's going to come back in part of our discussion here in a few minutes. In thinking and observing Bella and reading some of her prior reports and chatting with the team, I discovered that Bella had had multiple prior experiences with AAC. These prior experiences have included experiences with gestures and sign language, experiences with a no-tech, non-tech choice board with photographs, as well as experiences with a range of different light tech communication aids. Things like a Twin Talk, the iPad app, a GoTalk, and even the Big Mac. However, after observing Bella and speaking with Bella's family, parents, and her team, they all noted that very little progress had been made with AAC. And I came onto this team because Bella's mom and her speech-language pathologist had seen one of my books, and they contacted me because they recognized that they were encountering barriers and they were struggling to effectively support Bella. In fact, as part of my conversations, members of the team indicated that they felt like they were just grasping at straws and hoping something would work. And I think this is evidenced by the fact that the team had been trying very hard to identify appropriate AAC systems for Bella, but as mentioned, very little progress had been made. So when I came on to the team and was working with the team as a consultant, we decided to identify what the specific barriers were that Bella and her team were encountering. And the team identified a full range of barriers. Some of them were access barriers and others were opportunity barriers. As mentioned previously, the focus of this lecture today is on opportunity barriers, and so that's what I'm going to highlight now for the rest of this lecture. So as a result of conversations with the team and informal assessments, as well as observations of Bella in different environments, the team identified a range of different opportunity barriers, but prioritized the 4 that I'm going to talk about here today. They identified 2 knowledge and skill barriers, 1 practice barrier, and 1 barrier that is kind of mixed, possibly a mix between knowledge and skill and practice. So what I'd like to do now is discuss each of these barriers in more detail, and then I'll share strategies that we've developed and continue to develop to address each of these barriers. So the first barrier that the team identified was that they recognized that both they as professionals and communication partners had limitations in their knowledge and skills related to AAC. And I think it's important to note that Bella's team is not unique in this regard. There's actually a fair amount of research, and I would suspect practical experience for all of us in the audience, that would support this recognition that oftentimes professionals and communication partners do experience barriers related to limitations in their knowledge and their skills. So in thinking about a strategy to address this barrier, Bella's team and I decided that we would create a needs assessment. The reason that we thought it was important to create a AAC knowledge and skill needs assessment is that we were searching for a way to effectively and efficiently kind of narrow in on what the specific areas of AAC knowledge and need are that are presenting themselves as barriers. So the needs assessment that we created is divided into 9 categories, and the categories are based on the content that is presented in Buchelman and Light's 2020 Comprehensive Text on AAC. If you're new to the area of AAC and you're not familiar with Buchelman and Light's text, I highly encourage you to get a copy of that text because it serves as such a strong foundation of AAC-related content and topics. So we divided this needs assessment into 9 categories, which you see are listed there. And then within each category, we identified specific topics that might be areas of knowledge and skill needs. This next slide is going to show you a screenshot of the first part of this knowledge and skill barriers self-assessment. As I mentioned earlier, you can use that QR code in order to access the full tool, which will include all 9 of those categories as well as the subcategories. When you access the tool, the yellow highlight will not be there. That yellow highlight is really just to keep me focused as we're having this conversation. So, as noted prior, the purpose of this self-assessment is to assist individuals or interprofessional teams in identifying AAC knowledge and skill needs. Individuals or teams will begin the self-assessment by indicating whether each topic is a knowledge or skill barrier. So you'll note that first set of columns under knowledge and skill barrier includes yes, if it is a barrier, no, if it's not a barrier, and there's also a column called NA, or not applicable. That's because some of the topics that are identified on this skill assessment may not be applicable to all individuals. So NA just simply means it's not applicable in this situation. Once an individual or a team identifies which topic areas are barriers, so which topic areas have a check mark in that yes column, the individual or the team will then identify the priority of that identified barrier. So they'll indicate if it's high priority, meaning that it really must be addressed promptly in order to move forward, or is it a medium priority, meaning that it should be addressed as soon as possible, or alternatively, the barrier may be a low priority, meaning it should be addressed, but only after addressing topics of high and medium priority. We've been using this knowledge and skill barrier self-assessment now in a variety of different contexts. We've used it with teams, and so a recent example of a use of this with an IEP team that I've been working with is they collectively wanted to know how much they knew about AAC and if they had any areas that were barriers collectively. Because they all recognized that they all knew some things about AAC, but they weren't sure if they collectively knew everything that they really needed to know to work with an AAC user. So the team collectively completed this self-assessment, and what they recognized is that they did in fact have a lot of skills related to AAC. However, one topic that no one on the team knew very much about was related to vocabulary selection. And after further discussion, the team recognized that this lack of knowledge of vocabulary selection was certainly serving as a barrier. We've also used this tool with individuals. So recently I received an email from a prior student who indicated that she wanted to beef up her skills in terms of AAC. So she reached out to me and said, "Do you have any suggestions?" And what I was able to do was send her this self-assessment, which she completed, and she was then able to identify and prioritize several areas that were kind of fuzzy for her. And based on that prioritization, I was able to share with her resources and information that would help her address those knowledge and skill barriers. As I mentioned, we're using this tool now in a variety of different contexts. We're kind of informally piloting it, but as we pilot and revise the tool, our next step and goal is that we will create kind of a fillable PDF that allows teams to all complete the tool electronically, either simultaneously or asynchronously, and it will also allow the tool to be saved and shared with others. Now, the next knowledge and skill barrier that the team identified was that professionals and communication partners had limitations in their ability to identify and use resources to address those identified knowledge and skill needs. Because identifying areas of need is only one part. The next step is addressing those needs and finding resources that would help the team to address them. As a team, we kind of set ourselves the task, the goal, of identifying resources to address the knowledge and skill needs that they had identified. Quickly, what we recognized and learned is that there are so many excellent resources available that a team or a team member is going to need to curate those resources based on needs. So what I'd like to show you next is a tool, the Quick Reference Resource Guide, that is also available via that QR code. And right now you're just seeing the first part, a screenshot, the first part of that Quick Reference Guide. And it's not exhaustive. Rather, this is kind of a living document that Bella's team is adding to based on new information they discover, and they are curating it based on the needs that they identify. The yellow highlight, again, is just kind of based on, is just a tool to help me stay focused. If you click on this through the QR code, the yellow highlighting will not be there. But I did highlight a few of these that I want to talk about specifically because I think some of these resources might be of immediate benefit to some of you in the audience. The first resource is one that I've already referred to. That is the Buchelman and Light text, Augmentative and Alternative Communication. This text is now in its 5th edition. It's available from Brooks Publishing. And as I mentioned, this is an excellent foundational text to help individuals who are perhaps new to the area of AAC to really understand things at an appropriate breadth and depth so that then they can be effective team members on an AAC team or a child's IEP or IFSP team. You'll see several other references that you can peruse and check out at your leisure, but the next one that I highlighted is under that category of professional organizations and national committees. I suspect that many of you in the audience are already familiar with professional organizations such as ASHA, if you're a speech-language pathologist, or Council for Exceptional Children, if you're a special educator. But you may not be as familiar with an organization called the International Society for Augmentative and Alternative Communication, or ISAC. ISAC is a professional organization that focuses solely on issues related to AAC. So if you're not familiar with ISAC, I do encourage you to click on it, take a look at it, and see if this might be a professional organization that you or maybe another member of your team might be interested in joining. The last highlighted area on this knowledge and skill reference guide is under the section of National Centers and Federal Grants, and it is the RERC, or the RERC, on AAC. This is a national center that comes out of Penn State University, and if you click on this source, you're going to see that in addition to several other resources, it includes a series of interactive modules on a whole range of different AAC-related topics. These modules can be great for team members, they can be great for sharing with parents, they can be great for sharing with new staff as they come on board in a classroom. And we've been using them a lot with both my pre-service students as well as in professional development context with special educators, speech pathologists, paraeducators, and the like. And the feedback that we receive on these modules is very, very positive, both in terms of efficiency of accessing information as well as effectiveness of them feeling like they're really learning the information that they need. So do take a moment if you've not yet discovered these interactive modules that are available from Penn State through the RERC, RERC on AAC. Now you'll recall that another barrier that Bella's team identified was a practice barrier. And this practice barrier was that Bella had limitations due to a lack of opportunity for peer interactions. And you'll also recall when I was describing a little bit about Bella is that she was very motivated by peers. She would imitate peers, she would become very engaged and very kind of energetic around her peers. And so Bella's team recognized that this was serving as a significant practice barrier. Now, once we had identified this as a practice barrier, we had a pretty long discussion, and that discussion related to where do we start? A little more background, Bella was being served in a self-contained classroom, which resulted in literal physical barriers to peer interactions. And the team, in the context of this discussion, had big dreams to address this barrier. Many of their dreams revolved around full inclusion for Bella. And I have I am convinced that ultimately Bella's team is going to have success in addressing this barrier and providing Bella with a fully inclusive educational experience. However, at the time that we were initially embarking on this, the team also recognized that there were a lot of moving parts in terms of moving to full inclusion for Bella. And they also recognized that there might also be some attitude and policy barriers that would need to be addressed in order to move to full inclusion. So as a result, what the team decided to do is that in order to make progress, they would take small steps. So if you see this PowerPoint slide and the two different illustrations, the slide on the right with the very long distances between the rungs on the ladder kind of represents what might have happened if the team identified moving to full inclusion as their way to address this practice barrier. The team kind of recognized if they set that up as their strategy, they might never get to that first rung of the ladder. So instead, they decided to kind of take small baby steps with the goal of still achieving that same outcome. Some of their baby steps to increasing opportunities for peer interaction included things that were fairly simple, like changing the location where Bella was dropped off and picked up prior to and after school. Given the location of Bella's self-contained classroom, her parents oftentimes dropped her off, appropriately so, at a parking lot that was very close to that classroom. However, this resulted in a practice barrier in terms of opportunities for peer interactions because Bella's peers were dropped off at another parking lot that was on the other side of the school building. So Bella's team decided that one way to increase opportunities for peer interactions would simply involve changing the location where she was dropped off and picked up. Because once those opportunities were there for peer interactions, then the team could work further in terms of addressing access barriers that would allow Bella to initiate and engage in interactions with her peers, as well as perhaps knowledge and skill barriers for her peers in terms of helping peers understand better how to interact with Bella as an AAC user. Another fairly simple intervention that the team identified for increasing opportunities for peer interactions involved changing Bella's schedule, particularly as it relates to when she received itinerant services from an SLP, an occupational therapist, and so on. And what they had done is they had scheduled those and didn't realize that by scheduling them the way they did, Bella was not able to go out to recess with her typically developing peers. So the team was able to brainstorm a way to rearrange her schedule so that now Bella was interacting at recess with her peers. And again, once the opportunity was there, it provided the team with a way for them to then implement strategies, both to assist Bella in terms of her use of AAC, but also to assist communication partners, in this case the peers, with regard to how they can effectively interact with Bella. Now the final barrier that I want to talk about is one that, as I mentioned, is probably a mix between knowledge and skill and maybe practice barriers. Specifically, the team recognized that they had limitations in their ability to develop and troubleshoot interventions to address opportunity barriers. And this came about in kind of a logical way because as a consultant, I had been playing this role. I was facilitating the discussions to identify barriers, and then I was facilitating and supporting the brainstorming to identify strategies to address those barriers. But the team really wanted to build on their own skills in this area, and so we decided to add tools to their toolbox so that when I was no longer present as a consultant, they had the tools necessary in order to address this identified barrier. Now the team has several different tools in their toolbox. I'm only going to talk about two of them that I think might be most relative to you in the audience. The first is their more systematic use of action plans, and the second relates to contextual fit. Now, action plans is probably something that is not new to any of you in the audience. I suspect that many of you have utilized action plans and action planning forms in the work that you do professionally. Simply put, an action plan is a system that helps us keep things moving in the right direction. And Bella's team, just like many of you, had used action plans before. However, they had not used action plans as a tool for addressing opportunity barriers. So my role in terms of supporting the team wasn't really teaching them to use a new tool. Rather, it was supporting their generalization of the tool from how they'd been using it to also include opportunity barriers. Now, action plans oftentimes start with a problem statement, which we've already been talking about today. That's the identification of the specific opportunity barrier that exists for an AAC user and their family. Once a problem statement is identified, most action plans will include an opportunity for the team to identify the strategies that they will use to address the problem. And in order to identify the strategies, the process that Bella's team and I utilized was brainstorming. And in the early stages of brainstorming, what I discovered was that oftentimes there was only one or two members of Bella's team that was really actively involved in the brainstorming. And I would see that other members of the team were oftentimes less vocal, very quiet, maybe even a little hesitant to share their ideas in terms of strategies. And this was a problem because when you're engaged in brainstorming, we really want to collect as many ideas as possible from multiple different viewpoints. And so if we only had a couple of different viewpoints contributing, we were at risk of really missing out on the richness that brainstorming can provide. So as a result, we implemented a practice with Bella's team, which may also be one that you've utilized in the past, which involved the use of Post-it notes. So whenever we as a team were beginning brainstorming, we would pass out Post-it notes to each member of the team, and we would then spend 2, 3, maybe 4 minutes where each team member silently was writing down brainstorming ideas on individual Post-it notes. So for each idea, they put it on a separate Post-it note. This was done silently, only for 2, 3, maybe 4 minutes at the most. And what we then did is the facilitator of the meeting, which was not me, would collect all of the Post-it notes, maybe collapse them into categories if they started to see that there were some common themes, and then that facilitator would share the ideas that came up as a result of the brainstorming process. Then we would engage in more of a team, all of us together, discussing both the strategies that had been brainstormed via Post-it notes, but also this would oftentimes spur other strategies that folks hadn't thought of or hadn't written down. And the reason that this was really effective is we ensured that we got everyone's ideas on the table, and that resulted in much richer brainstorming conversations. The other interesting thing that happened when we started doing the use of using this action plan for addressing opportunity barriers is that sometimes once we had identified the problem statement and the strategies to address the problem, we then broke it down, a task analysis, into different action steps. And what we sometimes found is that when we broke those down into action steps and tried to identify the person responsible, we found out that sometimes we didn't have the right people around the table to really implement this action plan. So for example, when we started using this action plan to address that practice barrier of creating more opportunities for Bella to interact with her peers, we discovered that in order to really implement the plan, we needed some more people around the table. Specifically, we needed the general ed teacher who wasn't at the meetings that we had been having previously, but then started to join in them frequently once we started to do more inclusive opportunities with Bella, because she needed to be involved in this in order for us to create those opportunities around recess time and make sure that Bella's recess time coincided with her gen ed peers' recess time. We also recognized that it was important for us to have the people that were the staff that were at the drop-off and pickup location of school to become involved in this action planning, because they were going to be there when Bella was dropped off, and they were going to be there with the peers. So they were going to serve a critical role in terms of supporting those peer interactions. So the action planning form has resulted for us and several teams that I've been working with as an effective tool to really make sure that we keep the process moving, and also to make sure that we have the right people at the table. Now, the last barrier tool to address this barrier that I want to talk about is contextual fit. Contextual fit is a term in the literature that refers to the compatibility between an intervention and a variety of different variables. So contextual fit can refer to the compatibility between the intervention and the characteristics of the person for whom the strategy was developed, so the AAC user. Because we need the intervention to be compatible with the AAC user, we need a good contextual fit in order for it to be successful. Contextual fit can also refer to the compatibility between the intervention and the characteristics of the individual who will implement the strategy. The person who's implementing the strategy plays obviously a very critical role, and so ensuring a good contextual fit is going to increase the likelihood of success for us. Finally, contextual fit can also refer to the compatibility between the intervention and features of the environment in which the strategy will be implemented. The importance of contextual fit has been discussed and examined in the literature in relationship to supporting parents of children with disabilities in home settings, as well as supporting individuals with disabilities in school settings. So this concept of contextual fit is not new. However, to date, there hasn't been much discussion about ensuring contextual fit when developing strategies to address opportunity barriers. And because of this, Bella's team and subsequent teams that I've been working with have started using what we refer to as the contextual fit rating scale. This is actually an adaptation of a rating scale that was developed by Rick Albin, Rob Horner, and several of his colleagues at the University of Oregon. And I knew that this contextual fit rating scale existed, so I reached out to Rick and asked for permission to adapt it very slightly so that it was relevant for examining the contextual fit of both access and opportunity barriers. So what you're seeing here is just a screenshot of the first portion of this contextual fit rating scale. And again, you can access this tool if you're interested through that QR code. This only shows 5 questions. There's actually, I think, 15, 18 maybe questions on the actual tool. But what you'll see is that the tool asks the individual completing it to rate their knowledge of the elements of the strategy, their perception of the extent to which the strategy is consistent with their values and skills, and also the ability of their setting to support the implementation of the strategy. And you'll see it's simply a Likert rating scale of 1, strongly disagree, up to 5, strongly agree, and the individual completing the scale would simply answer questions such as, I am aware of the elements of the strategy, I know what I'm expected to do to implement the strategy, and so on. Now, we've been using this tool in several different contexts, and I had a recent experience with the use of this tool that I think is worthwhile to share. I had been working with a special educator who was doing some amazing instructional coaching with her paras, and she had instructed one of her paras on how to use time delay instead of using an immediate controlling prompt. Because what she had observed is that this para-educator, in the context of small group activities, would oftentimes immediately physically prompt the AAC user to access a symbol on their device instead of waiting just a few seconds to see if the AAC user could independently access that symbol on their AAC system. And those of us in the field recognize that by consistently and always providing that immediate physical prompt can present problems. Specifically, an individual who uses AAC may become prompt dependent and may cease to engage in independent responses because they recognize that someone's always going to prompt them. All they have to do is wait, that prompt is coming. So the special educator recognized this, and as I mentioned, had done systematic instructional coaching, and she had fabulous data that showed that the para got it. The para was able to use time delay prior to the controlling prompt. We had data that the para was implementing this use of time delay with fidelity, and we even had data to show that the AAC user was starting to independently use their AAC device. So we were pretty happy with this outcome. However, as time passed, what we started to see is that the para started to decrease their use of time delay and revert back to using that controlling prompt. And we weren't sure why this was happening, and so we utilized this contextual fit rating scale. The para completed the rating scale, and number 15 on this scale talks about whether or not it's stressful to implement this strategy. And the para indicated that, yeah, it was really stressful, which kind of surprised us because we didn't think time delay was a particularly stressful or complex strategy to implement. But what this gave us an opportunity to do, because we were perplexed, is we simply had a conversation with the paraeducator, and we said, tell me more about this. Tell me more about how this is stressful, so that we can kind of brainstorm how maybe to make it less stressful, a better contextual fit. And what we discovered is the para said that when they were implementing in this small group context, that there were several other kids, typically developing children, but a few of them were kind of attention seekers and engaged in kind of low levels of challenging behavior. And what the para noted is if they waited 5 seconds using that time delay for the AAC user, what sometimes happened is the other typically developing peers, attention seekers, would sometimes get off task, start to engage in some challenging behaviors, which was resulting in stress. Rightfully so. I would have been stressed as well. However, as a result of this dialogue, what we were able to do, and the special educator in this context was able to do, was simply rearrange the students in the small groups so that these attention seekers were spread out a little more evenly across each of the small groups in the classroom. As a result, this decreased the stress for the paraeducator, and then as a result, they were able to continue or restart using the use of time delay. So the importance of this contextual fit tool is you can use it as a rating scale, which I've done in the past, but you can also use it simply as a way to start conversations. We have to have conversations about contextual fit if we're going to increase the likelihood that our interventions will be successful. So I'd like to leave you now with just a final story and a final thought. Recently, I got an email from a colleague in a school who's working on addressing opportunity barriers. And she and I have had multiple conversations and even a few pity parties for ourselves as we have encountered barriers. But recently, she emailed and said that she used to think opportunity barriers were beyond her scope of practice, that her expertise was in working directly with kids, right? Directly with access barriers. However, now she realizes that she can't effectively serve AAC users if she focuses only on access barriers without attending to opportunity barriers. She also mentioned that she's recently experienced some small but meaningful successes, so think baby steps on that ladder in terms of the visual that we saw earlier, and that these small successes have helped her to actually believe that she can make a difference in opportunity barriers. And this confidence is so critical. In the words of Theodore Roosevelt, if you believe you can, you're halfway there. So thank you again for taking the time to think about opportunity barriers and to think about how we can better serve individuals with complex communication needs and their families. As promised, I want to leave you with that QR code one more time if you would like to access it. At that QR code, you'll be able to access both the PowerPoint slides that you saw today, as well as each of those documents or tools that I mentioned in the context of the lecture. You'll also see here my email address. Feel free to reach out if you have questions or if you just want to have a conversation about addressing opportunity barriers. Thanks again.
So before announcing this year's Goldstick Fellows, which are sitting in the front row, I would like to acknowledge my Goldstick Scholar predecessors who might be sitting here. Jim Halley, hello, if you're watching. We actually had an opportunity to talk to Jim Halley earlier today, so that was really fun. Mickey Ostrowski, if you could stand, and Hedda Madan Kaplansky, if you could stand. Jim, Hedda, Mickey, they were it. And then I get the opportunity to be the fourth one. So I am just like, wow. So I've appreciated all your combined wealth of knowledge and mentorship. Anytime I had a question, they were right there. Even Jim, who's now traveling, and he'll answer an email just like that. So I really appreciate. It's just big shoes to fill, and I appreciate them a lot. Continuing the Goldstick Scholar tradition, been a very honor. And again, I thank all of them. I want to thank Lisa Denson, who this wouldn't have happened without Lisa, because she's behind the scenes. And she has a pretty good team of people that are also helping her out. And I just appreciate them so much, because you may think I'm doing it all, and I'm not. I'm doing a piece of it, and she's doing all that other stuff. And especially the Goldstick family. Like, we wouldn't even be here celebrating all of these different great ideas if it hadn't been for all of you. So we do appreciate your support. All right. Drum roll. More than 15 years ago, and I should probably update that, Phil and Beverly Goldstick established a fund in the College of Education and the Department of Special Education in honor of their granddaughter, Marissa, who has Rett syndrome, a genetic disorder that affects the development and use of language, as well as many other areas of functioning. Phil and Beverly wanted their gift to impact the future of children and young adults like Marissa. We also want to acknowledge the essential role that Beverly Goldstick played in the family's generosity. Beverly was not only a loving and caring wife, mother, and grandmother, she also became a good friend to many people at the university, but particularly the College of Education. So we are just so thrilled with those relationships. In addition to supporting the Goldstick Lecturer each year, the Goldstick family supports doctoral students who receive the title of Goldstick Fellows. This year we were able to award 6, which has been just wonderful. Some years it's 4, some years, that kind of thing. So we're just so thrilled we were able to do that. We have 5 from the Department of Special Education and 1 from our Speech and Hearing Science department, and we're just really, really thrilled when we can have that cross-discipline relationship with other departments on campus. So please stand as I call you and stay standing. We have Christy Yoon from Special Education. Melanie Martin from Special Education. Megan Best from Special Education. Crystal Williams from Special Education. Ricky Price from Special Education. And Daniela Fanta from Speech and Hearing Science. In addition, this year the Marissa Zellinger Research Award was presented to Megan Best and Dr. Michelle Schutz. And that research award will enhance the research mission of the Department of Special Education and to contribute to scholarship, all of them, scholarly literature on topics relevant to Rett syndrome. And Michelle and Megan are a team, and they also have some teams at another university, which has been really kind of exciting. So this is really spreading out. And they will be, I'm hoping I get this right, examining the involvement of youth who use AAC within transition planning. So we're talking about older individuals going from school to their adult lives. And they'll study the perspective of youth with complex communication needs and their families and the educators and the service providers. So getting that whole team together. And so we want the perspectives of all of them who serve them to better understand the involvement of all those groups within that transition planning. So it is a big, it's a big project. So they hope to identify ways to improve on all the supports and resources available to those groups during that critical time of development. So this is wonderful. Let's give them all a round of applause. We are very proud of all of them. It is really great. Feel free to take your seats. Now it's my great pleasure to invite Phil Goldstick to share a few of his comments about the lecture. And if Ricky, you could hand him that microphone, that would be great. And you can stand. Yeah. Ricky has it right here.
Oh, swell. Thank you.
And is it on?
Yes. Hello, everybody. So wonderful to see this group here today to celebrate this information that we have. I'd like to first of all thank the administration here of the College of Education, Dr. Musa, the dean, Cheryl, and then our previous scholars, Hedda Kaplansky, Mickey Ostrowski, and of course Jim Haley. Jim, good to see you. What a group. I think I've always learned a lot, and not only me, but my family, every year when we have this event, because today what I think we saw is a roadmap now. I think a roadmap to intervention and strategy for how to deal with these barriers, which are huge. Let me tell you that one of the things that we have encountered is that our granddaughter Marissa has been in a program with the Keshet School of Special Education, which is a program that is started in the Chicago area, is going throughout the country. And in the peer situation, the children in her classes are integrated with normal children in either the high school or the grammar school or the 2 to K group. And that's been a fabulous thing in terms of getting some of the movement of the speech. But I think that's really really important. We're proud. We're very proud to have all these fellows and Marissa scholars receive these awards, because these people are, and all the ones that have been out in the last 19 years have been around the world, and they're promoting and they're teaching people and families And so I don't want to be too long here. By the way, I want to also notice a couple of people here. We're very fortunate to have great friends of former president of the university, Bob Easter, and Cheryl, his wife, here today. Stalwarts for not just the Goldstick Lecturer, but the university and friendships. Richard Herman, the retired chancellor of the University of Illinois, is here today. Richard has been responsible for so many programs, and something you guys don't even know is that when he first came here in 1998, my wife and I sponsored the seed money for the Jewish Studies program, and he was the linchpin that lassoed us. And he's a great friend, and he's here today. There's a few people that couldn't be here today because of illness, but thank you all, and God bless.
Well, that was exceptional, Susan. So you had no reason to be worried all day, which I knew and tried to reassure you this morning. So thank you again, and thank you, Phil, for your reflection. And thank you again to the Goldstick family for making this event possible. For those of you who might not necessarily be in academia, these fellowships, the importance of them for higher education and the importance for them for the students cannot be stated enough. I happen to be a recipient of a scholarship many years ago to come here to the United States, and their impact is transformational in the lives of students, that receive them. It allowed me to be here today as a first-generation college graduate. So thank you again. I hope you know what they really mean to us and to the students. Thank you, Susan, for this inspirational presentation. I think both your passion and commitment to the work you do, has been very evident. And I think as a field, as you noted, we need more people like you, who do this kind of passionate work. So I'll just say 2 words. Last week, I had an opportunity to spend several days in Washington, D.C., hearing from different federal agencies on the priorities that they have. And one of the things that was really emphasized was this importance of translational work and work that really impacts the communities that we work with. And I think Susan's was such a great example, of how the work that we do in higher education can really directly impact, the communities that we work with. And I'm very, very excited. I think we cannot have it planned any better. I think this is a testament to also our college's commitment to community engaged work to really serve the needs of the students and the families, especially students with communication disorders. So thank you again. And I do want to acknowledge the 2 faculty we have here. We have a strong cohort of community engaged fellows in the college that we support. Michelle and Eric are in the audience. And again, this is another way in which we really try to make those connections between research and practice to ensure that we become relevant and remain engaged in the lives of the students we serve. So thank you again all, and I hope you have a great evening.